you should be able to spend your money on the things that bring you joy. But being more mindful about the spending by knowing your hourly wage, ignoring the falsities of social media, and thinking before you swipe your card can have a huge impact on your overall financial picture. You're listening to the Isn't That Rich podcast, and we're your hosts, Jill Franks
and Ashley McVicker. As young females in the banking industry, we love simplifying the confusing yet everyday questions you have about money.
Like, how do I get my finances in order?
Where is my money really going?
How do I invest for my future?
How do I make my money work for me?
Can I really afford to buy that new home?
These are the questions that keep us up at night. And the truth is, no one was born knowing how to handle their finances.
And chances are, walking into a bank to ask for help seems intimidating.
Whether you're a single person in your early 20s saving for your first home,
or you're an empty nester wondering what to do with that extra spending cash,
this is the podcast for you.
Welcome back to another episode of the Isn't That Rich podcast. Today we are talking about the financial B word, budgeting. And if we're completely honest, everybody hates the concept of budgeting.
Yeah, it feels a little repressive.
Yeah. When people sit down to plan their budget, they usually do it with pretty good intentions. Like they want to save money, yes. They want to plan their future, get control of their spending. But the truth is, a strict budget can actually set you up for failure.
For example, let's say you reviewed your finances and set a strict budget to follow. You've cut all the unnecessary expenses and you've allocated specific amounts to each category. Then something comes up and you've been thrown a curveball. So like you want to go to a Taylor Swift concert and you pay $200 and then you can't afford your utilities. I don't know. That did not happen to me, but
things like that happen all the time. Like life happens. And it can really throw a wrench in your budget. And so oftentimes because they feel so restrictive, they just don't work.
Yeah.
And we're here today not to tell you like we don't believe in a budget at all, but we really do believe that understanding how much money you earn and how much money you spend every month is important to achieving financial security. So today we're going to talk about some of the guidelines you can follow to help make sure that you're spending and saving in a way that works best for you, that isn't super oppressive.
Or overly prescriptive.
Yeah.
Jill taught me that word today. So today we're going to be talking about some guidelines that you can follow that will help you budget in a non-oppressive way, something that actually is going to help you.
Yeah, so there is this rule that a lot of people go by, a lot of financial advisors recommend. It's called the 50-30-20 rule.
Yes, a lot of people have heard about this.
Yeah.
There's always different like fractional breakdowns of a budget. Like the 80-20 is a big one too. But today we're talking about the 50-30-20.
Yeah, and you know who actually kind of popularized this rule?
Who?
You're going to laugh. Elizabeth Warren. I know. So she wrote a book in the early 90s about the 50-30-20 rule, and it really became popularized, and a lot of financial advisors use it to this day. And we're going to break it down for you for what it means, because I think it actually gives the most flexibility in your spending.
Yeah. Do you use this budget?
You know,
or you want
I need
to use it?
I strive.
I tried to budget so many times.
But what happens to you?
I like forget about it, honestly, and I just swipe my credit card.
Yeah. And then do you feel like you're out of line with what you already budgeted?
Yes, because I look at my credit card bill and I think, well, I'm really spending the $80 that I'm supposed to be spending on just dumb stuff or just new makeup that I don't need.
Right.
I say that in every episode. I have a problem.
So let's break down the rule and the guidelines to what it actually is. So the 50% of the 50-30-20 rule is that 50% of your after-tax spending goes to your fixed expenses. So that's like your mortgage, your rent, your transportation. So think of any of your car expenses. Maybe you take the bus to work, that public transportation fee. This includes your insurance, your health care, your car insurance, your home and renter's insurance, and life insurance.
Yeah, so pretty much all of your necessities and things you have to pay for and that are a fixed expense that you owe someone every single month.
Right. And so you should also budget your food and groceries into this. So this is something to keep in mind too. And that might be flexible month to month, just depending on what your lifestyle is. But this is considered your fixed expense in your 50% category.
So that's a big chunk of your change. That's half of your income. After-tax income is going to all those things, which it is. Those are expensive things. So the 30% of your after-tax spending is going to go to flexible expenses, such as like a gym membership. These are like non-necessities, but things that we all do kind of need or want. So
they kind of feel necessary at this point of our life.
But you won't die if you don't have a gym membership. You can go walk at your local park. Anyway, cable bill, clothing needs.
Yeah. And your cell phone, I think, actually falls into this one too.
Wow.
I know.
Which no. But travel, so.
Yeah.
This is the spending you do because you can, not because you need to. So that's 30%, which is still a good chunk of change.
Yeah. And when you swipe your credit card spending goes into this as well. I don't know if you said that or not. I can't remember, but your credit card.
I was just saying I swipe everything and that's my 80. Yeah.
Yeah. So the credit card.
All my fun stuff, all my non-necessaries are.
Yeah. So if you have a credit card bill you pay every month, this is where that gets budgeted into the 30%. Yeah.
Even if you're buying like food with it?
Ashley, I suppose. Yeah. I don't know.
All right. We won't get too detailed in this episode, but the final 20% of your after-tax spending goes to future expenses like your emergency fund, your savings, and your investments. And those aren't always super fun to put money into because you see that 20% of your income and you think, I can just run with this.
Right.
But you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Because you should be saving for emergencies. You should be saving for your future and you should be investing for your future. So you're still not having to live on an 80-30-20 when you're 70 years old and you want to be living at the lake jet skiing.
Exactly. I think we do need to mention too that your student debt, like if you are paying back your student debt right now, if you have student loans, your student debt goes into this category. Okay. So make sure that you put that towards that 20%.
Do you think you should take the entire 20% and put it towards your student debt, Dave Ramsey?
I am not going to tell you to
I'm
be
asking
that
Jill hard questions today,
but
something to think about.
But here's the thing: if you are paying money on a loan that you have, instead of putting it in a retirement account, your retirement account is not earning as much interest as probably as much interest as that you're spending paying for that loan. So yes, I would put most of it into that student loan to pay it off before you. I mean, obviously, save for your emergency fund or have something built up.
Maybe you do a 50-30-20 inside the 20.
There you go. There you go. But really, I do think that instead of investing for the future, you should really get rid of the past first.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right. So how do we figure our own 50-30-20 budget, Jill?
So look at your pay stub in your paycheck and your paycheck after your taxes. So there should be several lines, your gross income, what you make before the government takes their...
it's a gross amount of money is what my mom would always say. It's gross. It's so big.
No, that's before the government takes their little chunk out of it.
Their little chunky chunk.
But then this is also before you take out any retirement or any health care on it. So that's that in-between number, right?
Okay.
So let's say you make $60,000 a year after taxes. You take home $45,000 a year. So after the government takes their chunk, you make $45,000 a year.
That's your net.
That's your net income.
Catches.
Yeah.
Gross is gross. The net catches. I love to say that.
Divide that $45,000 by 12, which represent the 12 months of the year. Mm-hmm. And that shows you your spendable monthly income.
Yeah.
Which if you use that $60,000 example, that equates to $3,750 of spendable income.
Every month. And we were talking about this, Jill. Mm-hmm. It is funny, like we do these budgets month to month, but sometimes people budget week to week, which might work better for you depending on your paycheck. And we might get to that. But.
I think that's a good thing to note here is that if you are getting paid weekly, you may want to budget how much you spend each week. Yeah. And you can really look at your expenses as they come. Say, that rent's coming every first of the month. Mm-hmm. That first week, maybe your budget's allocated a little differently.
Maybe you're not eating that week. Yeah. You're just spending it on your mortgage.
Right.
You're starving.
You might have to. No.
You might.
But let's talk about how you figure out the different percentages of your budget for this. So that 50% comes first. Those are your fixed expenses. So out of our $3,750, we know that we have $1,875 goes to our fixed expenses.
Yes. So you can just multiply that by 0.50.
Yeah.
And that'll give you that number.
Yeah. So to figure out how much goes in the 30% bucket into your flexible spending, you multiply 3,750 by 0.30, and that equals $1,125 into your flexible expenses. So that seems reasonable to spend.
But let's see what we're spending it on again. Our phone, clothes. Okay.
Your gym membership,
cable. Okay.
All that
maybe
stuff.
do this. That's a decent amount of money.
And then the next thing, your 20%, you multiply that $3,750 by 0.20 to get $750.
Okay.
And that should go to all your savings, your retirement accounts, paying back that student loan or any debt. And I think that sounds, when you see 20% of your budget going to your savings, that kind of makes you panic a little bit. $750 compared to $1,800 every month doesn't feel very significant, right? It doesn't feel like you're really building your savings.
Yeah, but then once it starts building, then you're like, I'm so glad I did this.
Yeah. And this is just a goal to work towards. Remember, if you're starting out and this is the first time you're like looking at your expenses, this is a goal to work towards. It's not something that you need to start out at, right?
Yeah,
so you can adjust as you go.
And you're kind of able to see, well, am I spending over 50% on my fixed needs? So how can I change some of those numbers around? Like, am I spending too much on utilities? Am I leaving the lights on too long? Am I, driving too many places and using way too much gas that I have to pay for in this economy? Like, there are things that you can change up and limit yourself on to give you a little bit more of a buffer in your income.
For sure. One thing I want you to note too is just like, you talked about being flexible with that. If you do end up dipping into the 30 or 20% category, so you have your 50% fixed, if you can't get your fixed expenses under 50%, that means you dip into the 30% bucket to pay for those expenses. So the amount of flexible spending kind of goes down, but you always want to make sure that you're saving close to 20% if possible. So let that be the last thing that you dip into if you're overspending in your fixed expenses.
Yeah, so if you need to tweak it, you can tweak it to a 70-20-10 budget.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
And then once you've worked with that for a few months, well, reevaluate. We always say that reevaluate your finances, look at what you're doing. See if you can bump it up to the 50, 30, 20.
Right. You can always move things around to fit your needs. So that's why budgeting, I feel like when you set a strict budget, it doesn't work. But if you're allowed some flexibility in it, that's when it's really going to start, you see some traction, you start saving more, and it's going to work out better for you.
Yeah.
But I think it's human nature that when you're making a spending decision and you want something,
you want it now, Amazon Prime,
you make an impulse decision, or you really, your friends are all going to the Cardinals game and you just really want to go to St. Louis and go to a Cardinals game with them. It is so easy to get off track, and you dip into your savings first most often. But that's what we really want you to refrain from doing.
Keep your fingers out of that.
Just get used to really spending within that flexible spending budget. And we're not saying that you should give up all the things that you love in life. Like, I know there's the latte factor out there. If that's what brings you joy, you should have that latte for sure.
What's the thing I've been laughing at lately? The latte thing. Someone's like, if you stopped buying a $5 latte every day for the next 5 years, it would only be like this much amount of money. Go ahead and buy the latte anyway. That's not 20% down on a house or something.
Yep.
But I get the concept. It is a good concept.
For sure. And these little spending, they do add up, just like the little bits of savings add up to see big results. So those little savings instead of spending can end up being a pretty big thing.
Yeah. And then when you have been saving money, you have way more flexibility. So then you have the flexibility to go out and do those things off the limb real quick if you want to go to the Cardinals game.
And you know what, Ashley, a lot of times in our life, we make spending decisions that are super out of line with what we actually value in our life. And that's what we're going to talk about next is like, how do we spend in accordance with our vision, in accordance with our values to get ahead in life? Like how many times have you looked back at purchases and just hated your decision that you made?
You just hate yourself.
I mean, seriously, I think about it. Sometimes I'll even like make a Amazon purchase late at night or something and it comes in the mail and my husband is like, what is this? And we both look at each other and we're like, I didn't order that. Did you order that? Seriously. Yeah. And you just immediately regret your decision. Yeah. So
you and Jill, you order a bunch of gadgets though too. Jill's like a gadget. Guru, like always. I don't know. I feel like you could refrain from spending so much money on these
oh my gosh
gadgets.
Okay, so
she has this like breathalyzer that tells you
were gonna say that.
how much food you've consumed during the. I'm like, Jill, she's like blowing in this breathalyzer before we eat lunch. I'm like, what's going on? Do you have a drinking problem? No.
I have to say my favorite influencer got to me and it's called the Lumen device and it's supposed to help you like track about how much fat versus carbs like, you're burning, and it's kind of cool. But
do you have a sponsor code for us?
You know, I don't. This is not sponsored, but anyway, it was cool to start. I haven't kept up with my Lumen, but it is one of the devices that was an impulse purchase.
Yes,
influential purchase.
Yes,
actually. So.
But maybe it lined up with your values. I don't know.
At that moment in time, right? No, but if I were to look back at that, and that's something you and I are kind of doing right now, is we're really looking at our spending. We've kind of made this challenge for this ourselves over the next 4 weeks. And we're going to be tracking our spending, and we are going to share our results with you on an episode of this podcast. And so we are going to work on value spending.
Right. And we've done this before, and it was like the craziest thing ever looking at. We literally took little notebooks, and anytime you spent money, you just write what it was in there.
Yeah.
And then you would look at your budget, what you made, and saw how it all fit in there. And you're like, oh, whoa, I've got this totally flip-flopped.
But if you guys would like to do the same challenge with us, you're welcome to. We'll kind of explain it here, what we're going to do over the next 4 weeks. But for the next month, track your spending. Don't change anything about what you're doing. Just write everything down.
Yeah. When you go to Target and you buy $300 worth of stuff, write it down.
Yeah. And if you go to the gas station and swipe your card and buy silly milk duds on your way out the door to drive to Carbondale with, then
every single purchase, write it down.
Yeah. What we're going to do over the next month after we have tracked all of our spending is we're going to Marie Kondo our spending. So I had explained to Ashley what Marie Kondo was, but Marie Kondo is an influencer. She's written a book. She's an author, and she's an organizer. So with your home, she goes through your home and she says, do you love this? Does this item bring you joy? If it doesn't bring you joy, you're going to get rid of it. Well, we're going to do the same thing with your spending. So we're going to Marie Kondo our spending. So after you have all 4 weeks of your purchases written down, you're going to take a highlighter and go over all of the things you did not enjoy spending money on and highlight all those things. Yeah. And that could be, first thing that comes to mind is your bills, like your electric bill, your cable bill, all those things are going to come to mind. And, nobody wants to spend money on your bills.
Yeah. So I think that's a big one is if you go through all those bills like your Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max. You probably don't need all those, even if you just watch one show on them.
I know.
So we're going to go through all of those and just see what brings you joy for spending or not.
Yeah. And also it might bring some awareness to you too, like, hey, I don't need to be paying this much for cable and all those subscription service. Or, hey, maybe it's time to negotiate with our cable company and get a cheaper rate on that cable bill.
Yeah. And remember what we're talking about so we can move our money around. So if you cancel that $17 subscription, well, that's $17 more you can put in your savings.
That's right. So as you're going through and highlighting all of these things that don't bring you joy, one of the things that might come up is your expenses for your home. And this is time to evaluate the big things like your house, like the rent that you're paying on your home. And is that worth it to you? Maybe you love the big home and that brings you joy. You love walking into this home. You love it. But maybe if it's getting to be too much for you, you don't enjoy it. Maybe you're spending more time cleaning your house and it's more of a hassle. Then that's time to reevaluate actually one of those big expenses that you have.
Yeah.
Maybe you'd be better off selling that home and moving into something a little bit more manageable for you, especially budget-wise.
Yeah, and sometimes people live in homes that are not within their budget. So we say here it's recommended that you live in a house that's 3 to 4 times your annual salary. So do the math. You know, if you had this $60,000 salary, well, the cost of your home should be max $240,000.
Yeah, so 60,000 times up to 4 times, right? From 3 to 4 times.
Yeah.
It was 240. Yeah.
So maybe do double your income or only 3 times your income, and that can help you save some money.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably not fun to spend money on a mortgage in a house you're saying, Jill, that you just don't love cleaning or even being at, maybe.
Right. Maybe you resent it, you know? That's not fun either. Or like we talked about the car too, there's kind of a rule of thumb too, if you're wondering how much that you should be spending on a car. Because that's, you know, when you're budgeting, you set out and you're like, I'm only going to spend $250
And
on.
it's so controversial too with a car. Like that you have to have a car.
Yes. So for our example that we've been using, the $60,000 salary, rule of thumb is you should spend 1/3 of your annual income on your car. So for the $60,000 example, that's a $20,000 vehicle.
Yeah.
So if you
Yeah.
are looking for something that's in your range and you're under $60,000, that's probably a good price point for a vehicle.
Right. And you're saying like if it's somebody that doesn't even care about cars, but they're driving a $50,000 car, highlight that and say, okay, it's probably time for me to make a change. I don't care what kind of car I drive or what it looks like.
Yeah. If it's safe and reliable and can get you from point A to point B, go for it.
Yeah.
As you're reviewing and you're going through with your highlight, don't forget to really focus on the things that you did spend money on that did bring you joy.
Yeah.
I mean, because those are the things that are in line with your values.
Yeah.
They're
And
going
you want to live life.
Yeah.
I always talk to my parents about this. I'm like, what am I saving money for? What am I supposed to be spending my money on? And they always say, you know, you should save and be good with your finances, but don't forget to live your life while you're doing those things.
Yeah.
So like you said, if you're going to a meal with a friend that you love that you haven't seen in 4 months and it's $50, that's okay. Yeah. I value things like that. That's where I love to go out to eat and I love to spend money on food because I get to sit there and laugh with my friends.
Yeah. And my grandma used this example one time, you know, when she was, you know, a big wedding present, like a really nice wedding present was always like a fine china. And what does the fine china do in your house? It sits up on a shelf, never to be used. Mm-hmm. And you can look at it and you can admire it. But if you don't use the fine china, then why is it there? Like if you're not putting it to use, then what is the point anyway? So I'd like to think about your spending that way too. So if you're saving and you have these goals and these things bring you joy, what is the point of having it in a bank account sitting there if you're not enjoying your life?
Yeah. I like what you say here. The process of paying attention to your money isn't about deprivation, but it's about honoring the way you spend your money that you've earned.
Yeah.
That's your time that you've worked to earn this dollar to go spend it on things. And you should honor yourself with your finances and honor others.
Well, it takes so much time out of your life to earn money.
To work,
Like what is the time value? Mm-hmm. Right? So what is your time worth? And that's another thing we're going to do is really talk about how to calculate your hourly wage to figure out what your time is worth.
Yeah.
And then when you make spending decisions, you can say, oh, this was
3 hours of my time.
Yeah. And
yeah, really, I do that sometimes. I'm like,
puts it into perspective,
or like
right?
I think about how much I make per day. And then like if I spend a certain amount of money that I made that day, I'm like, wow, I just worked 8 hours for this whatever. Mm-hmm. Was it worth it actually?
Right.
Most of the time it's not.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is though.
Well, it's kind of hard for some people to calculate what that is in their head. So maybe we can talk about like how somebody listening could calculate what their hourly wage is and what their time is worth.
Yeah. So most full-time employees work 2,000 hours a year, which that's kind of, I don't know, less than maybe I thought. I don't know. That was a weird number for me, but 2,000 hours a year. So to calculate your hourly wage, you need to divide your gross salary by 2,000. So that's that big number that you get before the government gets involved. For our 60,000 example, that's $30 an hour pre-tax. So that's your gross income. The next time you go to make an impulse purchase, be thinking about that $30 an hour and was it worth it?
Yeah.
Did it bring you joy or did it take away your joy?
Right. And how many, so say you spend $100 on dinner that you're with like two people that you just would rather not, maybe they're toxic to you or like they only talk about people or you just don't want to be around them, not a good fit for you. And you spend $100 on that meal. Well, that's the half a day of working if you're making $30 an hour. Is that worth it to you? So then it kind of gives you a space in your, to evaluate. No, it's not in my values to do that. It gives you a better no when it comes time to make those decisions.
Gives you more confidence when you're really thinking about your money and the way that you're spending it.
Yeah.
So the last step in all of this is to stop comparing yourself to others.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like that example we used about me spending my money on that device when it comes to the influencer. No, not at all. But I feel like it's so true. So many things in our life impact, and now more than ever, like keeping up with the Joneses, right? So it's in front of you everywhere. You can't get away from it. Whether it's influencers online telling you to buy this next thing, or it's like this lifestyle that like your favorite TV show. Carrie Bradshaw is like the first person that comes to mind when somebody that is, there's somebody online that influences you. Like, these people live outside their means. As a writer living in New York City, do you think you would ever come home with like
Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Fendi,
Manolo
Blahnik.
Blahniks. Like, there's no way that she in real life could have afforded all of those name brand clothing, but lived in an apartment in New York City, went out to dinner and drinks with her girlfriends every single night.
No way.
So what media has really done for us is like, there's no way that we can maintain the lifestyle that we're seeing. And
there's no way you can maintain these budgets that we're trying to put in place for people.
Yeah.
Because you want to just keep up with influencers.
Right. Exactly. And you're not seeing the full picture when you're seeing influencers online either. Yeah. So if you can try to let go of the notion that pop culture is real life and social media shows the full picture, then you will be set when it comes to budgeting. So we talked about a lot today when it comes to being in line with a budget and the flexibility in having a budget, and the three main things you can do today to really start fitting yourself into that 50, 30, 20% budget, if you want to call it that, is number one, do a spending tracker today. So for the next month, write down all your expenditures, take a highlighter to them, figure out what brings you joy, what's in line with your values and what's not. And maybe you negotiate and get rid of some of the things that you don't enjoy spending money on.
Yeah, and just know that we're doing it with you, so you're not alone.
Yeah.
And love if you shared it with us, too.
Yes, and we're going to, like we said, do a whole episode on our spending for a month and what we are, the conclusions that we came to after that spending. So if you want to do that with us, we welcome you to. So the second one is you can really figure out what your hourly wage is and make your spending decisions on whether it's worth your time. So is that purchase worth the time that you are working to spend the money you earn on it?
Yeah, that's so good. And then the third one is simply to stop comparing yourself to others. So stop trying to keep up with the influencers. You can buy a few of their little knickknacks once in a while, but it's not real life most of the time. And I think when you stop doing that, look at your budget, figure out how much your money is worth for an hour. I mean, I think you're going to be golden. Yeah. And let's just commit to the budget, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to wake up and say, I'm going to do this today.
That's right. And it's not always going to be easy.
No.
Like staying within it, within 50%, 30%, and 20% buckets. Who doesn't want to indulge occasionally? And we're not saying that you cannot indulge occasionally. You should be able to, but being more mindful about your spending and knowing your hourly wage, ignoring those falsities of
Carrie Bradshaw.
Yeah. And thinking before you swipe your card is going to have a huge impact in your overall financial picture.
Yes.
Look, it's not always going to be easy to stay within your 50-30-20 plan. It's just not. Indulging here and there, we want to make room for that. You should be able to spend your money on the things that bring you joy. Yes. But being more mindful about the spending by knowing your hourly wage, ignoring the falsities of social media, and thinking before you swipe your card can have a huge impact on your overall financial picture.
We hope you learned something from this episode, and we hope that you will jump on this spending tracker journey with us so we can all hopefully get on a good 50-30-20 budget or find a budget that works for our lifestyles. Once again, hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you on another episode of the Isn't That Rich podcast next week. So Jill, where do we go from here?
Be sure to check out our show notes for this episode, and also be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our newsletter. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.